The son of President Biden is convicted on gun-related charges. Will it affect the race for the White House? Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. Two weeks after former President Donald Trump was found guilty on 34 felony charges in a New York State hush money trial, now it's Hunter Biden, President Joe Biden's son, who has become a convicted felon. He was found guilty of lying on a form about his drug use during a 2018 handgun purchase. Benji Hire takes a look at the possible political impact of that verdict.
A father and son embrace. I am the president, but I'm also a dad, says Joe Biden. He's made no secret of his pride in Hunter's recovery from addiction, and there's no evidence connecting him to these offences. Yet Tuesday's verdict in Delaware comes at a fraught time, deep in the presidential campaign, when so much is at stake.
President Biden never really even came into play for me.
But this juror told CNN that neither politics nor the president were factors in deliberations.
His name was only brought up once during the trial, and that's when it kind of sunk in a little bit. But you kind of put that out of your mind.
There's been scant polling proof that the public is following this trial closely, or that it'll affect voting preferences.
I don't think Hunter Biden is involved in the government. As far as I know, he holds no position in the government, so really not much there.
First of all, I think the president's son is a separate person from the president himself. And I mean, not to bring in other political candidates, but I think just in general, we're talking about Trump and his current trial, or the trial that just happened. So I feel like all of this is it's just craziness that's been going on recently.
Just weeks ago in New York, Donald Trump was himself convicted over concealing hush money payments to a porn star. He faces several other criminal trials as he vies for the Oval Office again, alleging the US justice system is rigged against him. Joe Biden insists he'll respect the judicial process following Hunter's verdict. Donald Trump calls his own a witch hunt, a sham.
This will pose a contrast. I can say this for the public, and they should see the contrast between one person wanting to blow up the justice system and the other person accepting it at the pain of his own family. And so I think that question of character and respect for our institutions will be part of this campaign, and was long before these cases, and will be after these cases.
This isn't the end of Hunter's legal woes. He awaits a sentencing in coming months, then another trial in California in September on tax evasion charges. And he remains in the crosshairs of high-ranking lawmakers investigating his business dealings.
Today is the first step in delivering accountability for the Biden crime family. We must and we will continue as House Republicans to investigate the Biden crime family.
Donald Trump says Biden's, quote, criminal empire will come to an end when people head to the polls on November 5th. And so Americans now have a remarkable choice to vote for a felon or the father of one. Benji Hire, CGTN, Washington.
There is a lot to talk about. Let's bring in our panelists. From Miami, Jadan Horyn is a political analyst. From Nova Scotia in Canada, Spencer Critchley is a Democratic strategist and an advisor for the Obama campaign. Here in Washington, D.C., Joseph Williams is a former senior editor for U.S. News and World Report. And here in our studio, Art Estopinan is the president of the Estopinan Group. Welcome to all of you. Art, let's start right here in the studio. Let's start with the Hunter Biden conviction and whether that's going to impact the presidential race in any way. I should make it clear that President Biden is not accused of anything. He has got nothing to do with this trial. The link, of course, is that Hunter Biden is his son. But there are also links being drawn between this case and that of former President Donald Trump. How do you see it?
Well, Anand, I don't believe that the American people are going to vote one way or another because they convicted Hunter Biden. The fact of the matter is that it is a very sad situation. You know, as fathers, we want the best for our children, and obviously Mr. Hunter Biden is a very troubled man. And so I don't think that the American people will care one way or another. The fact of the matter is that there is a big distinction between the sons and daughters of President Trump, who are all very successful, professional, articulate, good-looking kids, or adults, and then you have Hunter Biden, that is a very troubled, drug-addicted man. And so I don't know, maybe that's one character judgment that voters will have.
Should he be punished for essentially being ill?
No, absolutely not. And that's why I said that it's a very sad situation, and I believe a lot of Americans feel the same way. But the fact of the matter is that he is not above the law, and DOJ wasted time in bringing him to justice for the FARA violations, for all of the money that he has received from China, from Russia, from Ukraine. All of those legal cases, some of them have elapsed, and that's why a lot of American voters are like, he needs to be brought to justice.
Okay, Joseph Williams, in the wake of the Trump conviction, when the former president was found guilty on those 34 felony charges, he went around saying that the system was rigged, that the justice system was rigged, that this was a political hit job, that the prosecution was politically motivated. But now, when we see the fate that Hunter Biden is facing, doesn't that dilute some of what the former president was saying? Joseph? Oh, Joseph can't hear me. Okay. Let me go to Jadan Horyn on this. Jadan, I'll put the same question to you. The charges that former President Donald Trump is making about the system being rigged, I mean, it doesn't seem to, it doesn't seem to bear anything right now when we look at what happened to Hunter Biden.
Well, I mean, there's one of a few ways to look at this. Certainly, that's the talking point that the Biden campaign and Democrats and their apparatchiks in the media have been parroting of late, and there may be some merit to that. Whereas on the other side, as your other guest pointed out, there is this distinct feeling, and with some evidence, that the Justice Department, the Biden Justice Department, slow walked the cases against Hunter. So, once again, like everything else in 2024, there are two different political lenses that this is viewed through. What I will say, though, is the most important lens is the voters. And it appears that neither Donald Trump's conviction nor the conviction of Hunter Biden has seemed to make an appreciable difference in the polls whatsoever. Every movement seems to be in the margin of error, both towards Donald Trump and towards Joe Biden. So, really what we have to ask ourselves is, a lot of this seems to be truly much to do about nothing. And it's certainly great for us to talk about on these panels, but voters seem to be just tuning this out. And maybe this because this is all happening in the summer. Maybe when the fall comes, people will care. But it just seems like right now, no matter what the spin that either campaign puts on it, and they both are strenuously putting their spin out there, voters just aren't, they're not listening, they're not paying attention, or they don't care.
Joseph Williams, great to have you back with us. What is your view on this? Jadan Horyn telling us there that voters don't really bother about this. They're not interested.
Well, the numbers seem to indicate that he might be right, but I kind of wonder if it might not be a longer-term thing that we might be watching, a longer-term phenomenon in which they do make a difference. Now, one of the things that I find very interesting is that the Justice Department did investigate Hunter Biden initially and found nothing there, but then a special counsel was appointed by the president, or rather by the Justice Department, which is independent of the president, and that's where the Hunter Biden charges came from. So I think this talking point, or this trope about the White House weaponizing the Justice Department, simply doesn't hold water either. So I think that ultimately the voters will be hearing about this. The negative ad season is a long way away, but it's coming, and we're going to hear more and more about both convictions as we enter the run up to the fall. And I think that it's only going to be a matter of time before it does break through to the consciousness of voters. I mean, right now we're still in kind of the aftermath, and there has been some indication that Trump's conviction is moving independent and swing voters at the margins, but not enough for an appreciable difference right now. I think that may change.
Spencer Critchley, good to have you. One of the accusations we're hearing from Republicans is that Hunter Biden did, in fact, get favorable treatment from the justice system, and it was only a very alert, vigilant judge that prevented him from getting what was termed at the time a sweetheart deal.
Well, I disagree with that. This started out as a tax case. And I think that the issues that the judge raised were worth considering, and it went the way it went, but I wouldn't call it a sweetheart deal. Mm-hmm. But I would step back from this and all other such stories that are being advanced by the Republicans. And unfortunately, I think we just have to assume, and I will not say that I do not think this has always been true of the Republican Party, but today's Trump Republican Party is a party that is not just prone to saying things that aren't true, but is actually trying to undermine people's confidence that truth is even possible to discern. I think that's the larger game here. And I think it's very important not to indulge the charade by pretending there's some merit to these charges. Mm-hmm. Now, it's entirely possible that there would be some kind of malfeasance in the Biden administration, of course, like there can be in any administration. But in order to demonstrate it, you need some evidence and you need to be able to link facts with logic, and all of that's beside the point in this kind of case. And it's a constant assault, not just on the Biden administration, but really on confidence in the rule of law, in journalism and democracy itself. It's the constant maintenance of an alternate reality where things become true simply because you repeat assertions over and over and over again and get them echoed throughout a media ecosystem that's friendly to you. Mm-hmm. And that really is the larger issue, and really the far larger threat to the system that most of us, I hope, would want to preserve, whether we're on the right or the left, the basic gift of democracy that we've been lucky enough to inherit, but are at risk of squandering, in my view.
What do you make of what Spencer told us there, that there is a risk that the entire system, or the integrity of the entire system, could be damaged?
Absolutely, 100%, but it's not due to the Republicans' alternative reality, as he mentioned. Mm-hmm. The facts are the facts. And Hunter Biden is known in Delaware as the Prince because he is the son of President Biden, and he's always been in elected office. And he's known, and the Prince was convicted of all charges by the jury within a very short period of time. And the two-tier system that is happening at this time, with Hillary Clinton getting off scot-free without any charges, Biden and the allegations of the corruption of accepting money from all these foreign countries that I mentioned before and not being brought to justice because he's too senile and too old, according to the Justice Department, to be brought to justice. I mean, what kind of alternate reality is that? And that's what the American voters are watching. They're looking at that. I mean, we're looking at the invasion that is happening across the border with Mexico every day. Millions and millions of people are coming here illegally, taking away jobs from Americans. The crime rate that is going on and all these other inflation and gas prices, and the voters want to change, and that change is President
Biden is just.
If I might, Anand,
yeah, go ahead.
Making my point for me. It's almost as if Art wants to demonstrate my point for me. So that was an example of what I'm talking about. If we now spent the next 10 minutes pointing out the not just factual unsupportability of those assertions, but the internal logic.
So there's no illegal invasion.
Let me finish.
No. So there's no.
The point is to bury.
Let Spencer finish and I'll get back to you.
A key part of this technique is to bury people in a whole bunch of unrelated assertions, and make it so that it's impossible to refute all of them because we would run out of time. But to get back to the point, how is it possible that the rapid conviction by a jury of Hunter Biden with absolutely no interference by President Biden, with him in fact advertising that he would not pardon him, he would not interfere, how is that
those are the
proof
facts.
Of a rigged Justice Department?
The guy was guilty. Those are the facts. He was
so
guilty.
The Justice Department worked in this case, but it failed to convict Hillary Clinton because we don't like the result. this is the logical
It
incoherence,
failed to
but it's
convict
beside
Hillary
the
Clinton.
point. It's beside the point.
They only
It's
charged her
beside the
with
point.
$8,000
I
fine.
can do this
Okay.
as long as you can do it.
$22,000.
All right, you're both talking. We can't hear you.
I'm
Spencer,
feeling pretty fit.
finish your thought.
I've been
Finish your thought.
exercising. My lungs are in good shape. I can go as long as you want to go.
Yeah.
So to
wait, hang
finish
on.
that thought,
Spencer, finish your
this
thought.
is
I'll get to
a
Art.
perfect demonstration of what I'm saying.
Okay, go
This is
ahead.
a perfect demonstration of what I'm saying because we get a sequence of assertions. There isn't enough time to refute them all, and if I were to waste my time refuting them, there would be an endless supply of new ones.
Speaking of President Obama, he spied on President Trump in the campaign in 2016.
Here we go with another one.
But
here we go.
Isn't that the truth? I mean, what about the FISA? What about the FISA report that allowed for the president, for the DOJ to spy on President Trump's campaign staff? Give me a break.
You're forgetting about
President
the underground
Obama has not gone to jail.
You're forgetting
Secretary Clinton has not gone to jail.
What about the underground tunnels?
Gentlemen, I'm now going to move on. We have two other guests. Joseph Williams, getting back to the cases that we're talking about right now. I mean, there has been an impact, especially in the Trump case. It's not necessarily in terms of a political impact, but according to Newsweek, Trump is raising record sums of campaign money in the wake of those guilty verdicts. I mean, even in Democrat strongholds like California, there's a report that he raised $12 million in just one night in California.
Well, again, that's because we are hearing stuff that his base really agrees with. I mean, he is making things up sometimes out of whole cloth. I mean, the fact is that he was convicted in a fair trial, and it's fair for him to use it to raise money, mainly because his followers are incensed. It riled up the base, and that's where a lot of the money is coming from. I mean, California, while it's a Democratic stronghold, is not necessarily a monolith. Republicans can go there and raise money too, particularly if they've got this kind of a message that Trump wants to deliver to them and that they agree with what he's saying. But I do agree with what Spencer was saying, is that in fact, we are living in two different realities. And in fact, there are logical fallacies with some of the arguments that Republicans are making about the justice system. And in fact, there is a two-tier justice system. And I would argue that Donald Trump got the benefit of the justice system that a lot of other people don't get, particularly people who look like me and people who don't have a lot of money. He was treated very, very well by the judge, even though he was cited by contempt in charges that would have brought most people to jail. And he avoided jail mainly because everybody knew it would be a political maelstrom if he actually did get barred, because he's got such rabid followers.
Right.
So I think that there is a justice system that's two-tier. You look at it very closely, and the tiers are not anything like what the Republicans are describing.
Okay, I want to move away from these cases right now, move on to the presidential race itself. Jadan Horyn, we are 2 weeks away from the first presidential debate. These debates are not being organized as they normally are by the Commission of Presidential Debates. There will also be no live audiences in these debates. How pivotal are these debates going to be? When we look at the numbers right now for the two candidates, they're pretty close to each other.
Yeah, I think the debates are going to be incredibly pivotal. One thing I did want to point out is, both Spencer and are apparently living in their realities. But the reality is that Donald Trump still leads, contrary to the spin on either side. And, this debate is a gambit by Joe Biden. I think Politico had an interesting article that the themes of populism are moving across the West, and Joe Biden, Emmanuel Macron, and the Prime Minister of the UK, Rishi Sunak, all three of them have attempted to kind of take the bull by the horns and change the narrative. And it was Joe Biden that actually, moved Donald Trump towards this debate. And I think the Biden campaign really views this as an opportunity to reset in all of the swing states. We see, the Biden campaign is now taking seriously the erosion that they have with Black voters. We see them taking seriously the erosion that they have with Hispanic voters, with huge outreaches. We see them staffing up in Florida. We see them now reinvigorating their campaign apparatus in Virginia. So, the Biden campaign is taking this seriously, and they're building up to believing that this debate will make, a seminal difference in this election cycle, which does appear to be frozen, contrary to all of the noise that we just heard. It is frozen within a margin of error with Donald Trump in the slight lead. So the debates will make a difference. Americans are going to pay attention. They're going to tune in. It's going to be must-see TV.
Spencer Critchley, what's your view on what these debates could do for either candidate?
I really cannot predict. I agree that the Biden campaign is probably seeing it as a good opportunity for Biden because he has shown that not only is he able to argue rationally, but he's able to argue passionately and connect with people on just a simple human level instead of, listing policy points, which, for example, I think was one of Hillary Clinton's major weaknesses and has been a weakness with many Democratic candidates. I think that especially in the post-war years, starting about the 1960s as the baby boom generation was growing up, Democrats tended to become better and better educated and have tended to become more and more stuck in their heads and to approach politics intellectually when it's really largely an emotional art and something that I think Republicans often understand better. But I think that Biden knows this. And as he showed in the State of the Union, knows the value of connecting with people at the simple human emotional level, which is where most voters are judging you ultimately. They're not really analyzing your policy points. They're looking for somebody they feel they can trust, who will be a strong leader and who actually cares about them is really what it ends up coming down to. So I can't predict how that's actually going to go. Nobody can, but I agree that's probably the way the Biden campaign is looking at it.
Joseph Williams, the way the system works in the United States, that it's just relatively few voters that are going to determine the outcome of the election, isn't it? In those swing states, as we refer to them, and if we narrow it down even further, possibly in a few counties in those swing states. So what does the debate do for those people? I mean, you'd need to change minds in those counties.
You need to change minds in those counties, but there is a margin, and the margin is probably 10 to 15% either side. Those are the ones that that both sides are going to try to connect to and convince the undecided voters, the swing voters, the voters who live in those areas that aren't necessarily hardcore R or hardcore D. And that's a tough act to swing, mainly because you're trying to not alienate your base, but you are trying to convince this narrow margin that may not necessarily understand your ideology or may not necessarily agree with it, but aren't necessarily locked into another position. So that's the act that's going to have to happen. And it's very, very tricky. It's very difficult. The way the system writ large is set up, even beyond that, even beyond the swing states, we're talking electoral college, we're talking election districts, we're talking Congress, Senate, and the House. It all matters in a larger picture. But it focuses down on this narrow group that you have to convince to your side one way or the other. And I think that Spencer is right. It is going to be an emotional connection and not an intellectual one. And that's a significant challenge for both Biden and Trump.
Art, I want to move on to one other issue, and this is turning out to be one of the key issues in this election cycle. It's the issue of immigration. I mean, it's an issue in every election cycle, but we're hearing more and more about it right now. President Biden just passed this executive order, which will seriously reduce the number of people who can apply for asylum here in the United States. It basically caps it at a certain number. What is the political fallout from that?
Well, the reality is, Anand, as you know, and we've mentioned in your program several times, that the American voters are very upset because they see the criminals that are coming in. They're freed within hours after being processed.
Yeah, but that's a generalization, isn't it? I mean, most people who come here are seeking genuine asylum because they're running away from poverty. They're running away from crime.
100%, but we cannot have an open border, and that's what we have now. That's why the House. The House Republicans impeached Mayorkas, and Senator Schumer did absolutely nothing with his hands crossed. He did not take any action. The fact of the matter, the Republicans are not happy with this immigration plan, the executive order that President Biden has put forth, because it still allows about 2,400 immigrants a day, which is close to 2 million a year. According to the former DHS Secretary of DHS for President Obama, he said that number is a crisis, and we have more than a crisis in the border. And after inflation, immigration is the most important issue for voters.
Jadan Horyn, on this issue of immigration, I mean, as Art points out, that Republicans are unhappy with what President Biden did with this executive order, but it looks very similar to something that former President Trump has been advocating.
I think this is the entire irony of this issue, is that we know that both political parties in the United States run on this election cycle after election cycle, but every time they get the opportunity to solve it, they punt on it. And so Republicans should be celebrating, President Biden signing this, but instead they're grimacing and knowing that the Biden campaign, which really that's what the political implications of this is what we're talking about. The Biden campaign understands that they need to neutralize this salient issue with voters, and for the life of me, I can't understand why they're not talking about things that have won them elections in the last 2.5 years, which is reproductive rights. Today we had the nation's largest, yesterday, the nation's largest Protestant denomination come out against IVF. That is a gift for Democrats. Instead, they're talking about immigration. So, they're talking on and defending on Republican talking points. In the Biden campaign, as long as they're doing that, they're going to be playing catch up. And frankly, the faster Republicans move away from, the IVF decision by this evangelical denomination, the faster they look reasonable in the front of moderate voters. But yet here we are talking about immigration in the executive order that could have been signed by Biden a long time ago and has now been signed, and that becomes a salient talking point for Republicans and a gift that keeps on giving on a topic that Democrats just shouldn't even be defending on.
Spencer, we've got a minute left. What's your view on this?
I think that's a smart analysis, but on balance, I disagree with it. I think that Biden's position on immigration is a good faith position, given that there actually is an enormous surge in border crossings, and under Biden, there's actually been an enormous surge in enforcement. And I think that Democrats need not, in fact, should not run away from any issue. I think they should lean into every issue. Now, of course, some issues are more important than others, and I agree reproductive rights is a crucially important one for them. But I think that, of course, the reason we don't have the immigration reform we could have had is that Trump ordered the Republican Congress not to move forward on the greatest bill they could possibly ever have dreamed of, because he frankly said, I want to exploit it as a political issue, and his followers are okay with that level of cynicism.
Yeah, right.
Okay, we are going to have to leave it there. Thank you to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat, but the conversation continues online. Join us on CGTN America's Facebook page to comment on this or any other show, or chat with us on X at CGTN America. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.